Hello, everybody. Hi. Um, it's good to have you here. And so, this is something new for me too. I haven't streamed on. Hi, Navina. Hello. Hi, Manisha. Hi, good evening. Good to have you here. So, StreamYard is a new platform for me too. I haven't done live streaming through StreamYard before. But yeah, so I think there's a plus time. So you can all hear me. Just can you just let me know that you can hear me clearly, please? Am I clear? Hi, Navina. I'm excited too. Is my voice clear? Hi. I know somebody commented now. See, actually, what happens with StreamYard is that it does not, Facebook does not allow StreamYard to access your photo or your name unless you give permission to it. So if you just, go to facebook.com/StreamYard, then, that's all. So once you do that, you can easily, um, allow your face also to be seen here. In case you want your photo and your name to be seen here, then please just, yeah, you can do that. So yeah, good, great. So you can hear me. So I'm going to start. Um, First, the what would I say? So first, I need to let you all know that this is something new for me too. I haven't done a book discussion in such a formal way before. I've tried to do the best that I can, and it can be a good and great success only if you join in. So yes, please join in, keep posting comments, and please join in the discussion. Um, what I'm going to do is, without any further ado, let me just start with the discussion. I have a small presentation for you. So let me share my screen and you can continue hearing me, but you would be looking at the presentation. So in case there's anything, you can keep posting your comments and I will be able to view your comments. So let's begin. Okay. I hope my screen is clear for everybody. Yes? Okay. So today we are discussing Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. And what I wanted to start off with was, I'm sure you must have, read the book, and I'm sure it was a very impactful read. What I felt would be a good idea was just to have some broad points of discussion so that we don't go all over the place. But of course, if there's something that I'm missing, please just, let me know. And in case any of you are interested in joining the discussion also, please do let me know. In that case, then I can send you the invite link and you can get added to the video. So you can also join in with the audio and video, so we can also we will be able to actually see you. Okay. um, so just a second, please. I'm sorry. Okay, so let me begin. So today I thought, let me slightly touch upon a little bit of the history in which this book was written. Then, since most of us are writers here or people who are interested in writing, I thought we'll talk a little bit about the literary devices that uh, Toni Morrison has used in this particular book. Then we'll go to the crux of the book, which is about physical beauty. So physical beauty is the main crux upon which the entire book is built. And then I just had a few questions which I thought we can discuss and talk about. Uh, Please feel free to join in the discussion, and you can just at any point, if you have something to share, please just drop in your comment below. It would be great, and we can read out your comment and share it with everyone. uh, okay, so let me begin. I might sometimes need to shift between the screen and the thing, because I'm right now in this, I'm not able to view your comments. So I'm just going to be stopping after every couple of slides and go back to the comments and have a look at it and then come back. Uh, okay, so let's continue. First, let's see a little bit about the history of this movement. Um, so till the 1970s, there were some African American writers, and there were some African American women writers too. But however, it wasn't a very you can't call it a very strong period before that. In 1970s, there was this huge uprising in African American women's writing, mainly because two important movements clashed at that point of time. One was the women's right movement, and the other was the Black Power movement. What happened was, Black women writers understood that they faced discrimination in both these movements. In the women's rights movement, they faced racism, and in the Black Power movement, they faced sexism. So they were having difficulty in their own community itself from the men, and when it came to women, they were facing racism from the other women there. So this particular situation was um, researched about and written by many famous women writers during this period. And some of the most famous books which came out were, I've just given the list here: I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and The Black Women, The Third Light of Grange Copeland, Alice Walker. Alice Walker, I think, is more famously known for The Color Purple, and of course, The Bluest Eye, the book which we read. What was special and common between these books was that this was the first time that authors were addressing a Black audience rather than a white audience. So all this time, there were books about Blacks, but they were written for a white audience. For example, Uncle Tom's Cabin, or various other books. I'm not able to think of anything at the spur of the moment. But the books in these 1970s, the books by these writers were the first ones which were addressed to a Black audience. In fact, there is a quote by Toni Morrison where she says, that for me there is no other, writer, right? No other reader. I am Black and I write for Blacks. Nobody else exists for me in my, in her audience. This is what she wants, and this is what she believes in. The second point, the common, what was common between these books were, for the first time, they focused on specific Black communities. Otherwise, what happened before this was the Black community was just spoken to as a whole. So it was a very monolithic, narration. So they did not have a segregation between the Black community, which was wrong, because it was there. It was not all the Blacks were treated the same, which we will be seeing about that a little more later in when we discuss about The Bluest Eye. But so this was one more thing which was special when compared to the books in that period. They focused on specific Black communities and not on a monolithic Black community. And the third most important thing was, these were all books about Black women and their relationship with Black men. It did not care about the relationship between Blacks and whites. All the books which were written before this focused on the relationship between blacks and whites and the oppression faced by blacks and other things like that, but mostly in all these books, of course the oppression existed, so they weren't covering it up, but it was not the focus of these books. These books were focused between black women and black men. That's it. So these were this was the importance of the 1970s writing by black women writers. The next thing, which happened in 1990s, which was a huge turning point for African women writing, African American women's writing, were three very important events. I just wanted to, share it with you. One of them was that Maya Angelou, that is the author of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, she became the first African American and the first woman to read her poetry at the US presidential inauguration in 1992. And in 93 and in 95, Rita Doe, who is who's another famous poet, she became the first African American and also the first woman to be named as a poet laureate of USA. And of course, the most important thing which happened was Toni Morrison was the first black women novelist to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. So these three important events in 1990 gave official recognition and strength to black women writers. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment just to check back if there's some comments or if I've just missed something. So just a minute. Yeah, so okay, so there is quite a few comments. Let me just read them. So hi, I'm sorry I can't see your name and your photo. In case you want to show that, then please go to facebook.com/StreamYard and just give permission to them so they will be able to show you. You chose a very good book, ma'am. Thank you so much. Tulika says, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Help were all written for a white audience, even though they seem to address black people's concerns. Very true, Tulika, very true. And which is why I think it became so special to the, black people to call Toni Morrison and Alice Walker as their own, because it was a voice which was not, in many ways, not condescending. It is a voice which showed realism, I would say. Okay, and Navina says To Kill a Mockingbird is a real story. Okay. Anushri says, this is very intriguing. Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Anushri. Thank you for joining in. Okay. And this is my mother. Hi, Ma. And hello. Yeah, Manisha says, love how you brought a presentation along. Thanks, Manisha. I hope you find it useful. So once again, I'm going to switch back to the presentation and let's go on. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next point. Okay, so let's slightly talk about the literary devices. Again, I don't want to go very much in depth in this, but I think since many of us are writers here or interested in writing, this might be something which we might like. So the beginning of the book, the very beginning of the book, you have that a kind of a children's book kind of a introduction. Here is the house, it is green and white, it has a red door, it is very pretty. So there's this paragraph. So actually this was a paragraph which was a school primer in US, which children learned, and it shows a very beautiful happy family. There's a very nice mother and The mother laughs, and there's a father. He's big and strong. Father is smiling. There's a dog. There are children, and it's a very happy thing. And then you in the very next paragraph, the same paragraph is repeated, but it goes a little more faster. Then once again, you have the same paragraph is again repeated, but this time without any punctuation, capitalization, and without any space between the words, and it goes into utter chaos. So this was something which has never been done before in literature. So initially, when this book came out, and people had really liked how, with a simple school primer, which everyone in US is already familiar with the same paragraph, that such a different meanings could be drawn from it just by the way of punctuation and just with space. So when asked about it, Toni Morrison said that she wanted the gradation to be seen from happy orderliness to a dirty chaos. So the happy orderliness actually denotes the white households, and then comes the slightly chaotic one, which would be something like what you know uh, Claudia's house was, slightly chaotic, but not so chaotic too. And then comes the dirt and chaos, which is what Piccola's house becomes. And so this was an interesting literary device which I wanted to talk to you about. And the second one is there are two narrators in the story. So one is Claudia, who tells the story, and adult Claudia tells about what she saw as a child happen to Piccola. And again, there is another narrator who's an omniscient narrator who speaks about all those things which Claudia couldn't have seen or couldn't have understood. Now, what happens in this is that usually in writing, we are told, at least in a book of the length of The Bluest Eye, we are usually told it's not a good idea to have multiple narrators. It's affects the flow and all that. But somehow, personally, I didn't feel that the story was gripping for me. But Toni herself, in a 1977 interview, speaks about her narrative style in The Bluest Eye. And she says, when I wrote that section on Charlie, I thought it would be very hard for me because I didn't know that as intimately as I knew Pauline. But it is the only time. I've never written anything in my life when it all came at once. When I got to Pauline, I could not do it. I could not make it. I didn't know what to write or how. And I sort of copped out anyway in the book. She says she copped out in the book because I used two voices, hers and the author's. That is, she means Claudia's and the omniscient narrators. There were certain things she couldn't know, and I had to come in. And then there were certain things the author would say that I wanted in her language. So that there were the two things, two voices, which I had regarded at any rate as a way in which to do something second best. I couldn't do it straight out the way I did every other section. So this is something like Toni rethinking about it. But then I wouldn't really think, I would say I wouldn't really read too much into it. I just saw this, so I wanted to share it with you. Because I think all writers, after their book is out, always feel that they've made some mistake in it, or that they could have done better, which is fine, it's totally okay. Again, it's the same thing with where she uses the ending of the novel as a tragedy. Somehow, the end of the novel, usually an ending leaves one with hope. But it's not really so over here, because especially these words had a lot of impact on me. We say the victim had no right to live. We are wrong, of course, but it doesn't matter because it's already too late. So this also kind of made me feel a little, it didn't leave one with hope, but then of course, maybe there is no hope in it when you think about Piccola. But again, there was another interview by Toni Morrison in a 1986 where she says she wants to rewrite The Bluest Eye. And in that she mentions, and the ending wouldn't be that way. I mean, it would have that information, but I would have more courage there. So even maybe Toni also felt later on that maybe she should have left a little more courageous and hopeful note there. But like I said, again, let's not read too much into it. With that, once again, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and come back to see if there are any other comments. Sorry for doing this up and down thing. I should have kept two screens, I guess. I didn't know better. Yeah. Yes. Very touching book and true. Yes, it is quite true. And I think there are a lot of Pecolas around, and Toni has just touched the tip of it. Okay. Tulika says, I agree, the presentation is wonderful. Thank you, Tulika. That means a lot coming from you, considering that you're such a avid reader, and thank you so much. Okay. The bluest eye is banned in many schools and libraries due to sexual abuse. Maybe it wasn't, I'm not sure. So basically, there are, I think, 2 points of view in this. One is that some things are said that it's not suitable for children, so they shouldn't read. However, the other point of view is it's wrong to really stop children from reading any kind of literature. It's always okay for them. They understand and take what they take at various ages, because even for us, like I might have read Great Expectations when I was very small. I don't know what I understood, but then later when I read it and reread it, I understand certain other things from it, and I take away more from it. So maybe banning in schools and libraries, I'm not very sure whether it's right or wrong. I don't know what to say. Yeah. Ma'am, you have to reposition the participants' comments. They are blocking the view of the slides at the bottom. Okay. But can you see the comments even when the slides are going on? I thought it would go away after that. No? Okay. Fine. Let me see what I can do about it. I'll do that. If it happens again, just let me know. I'm going back to share the screen, and let's continue with the presentation. Okay. So as we decided in today's topic, so we're going to be. I'm just going back a little. So we saw about a little history. We saw about literary devices. I just wanted to focus a little bit more about physical beauty, because I think that's the crux of the novel. So I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into this point, and please, as always, please keep the comments coming. So about physical beauty, I have a few points which I wanted to discuss with you. One was about the racist standards of beauty. Secondly, I wanted to talk about how Black as beautiful changed over the years, and how the obsession with physical beauty influences the behavior of the characters. And also how Toni Morrison says that this is being reinforced through popular cinema and consumer culture. We'll talk a little bit about Pecola's quest and the divisions within the African American society. So coming to racist standards of beauty, so who decided that, you know, white is beautiful, blue eyes are beautiful, and straight hair is beautiful? How did this even begin? In case you wondered that, I just wanted to show you a little bit. So there is this French diplomat and ethnologist, Count Joseph Arthur de Gobineau. I found a few. He's popularly called as the father of racism, in fact. So this is one of his quotes which I found. I have no hesitation in regarding the white race as superior to all others in beauty. Human groups are unequal in beauty, and this inequality is rational, logical, permanent, and indestructible. So I wanted to share one more with you. So this is Knight Dunlap. He's Professor Dunlap. He's from the Johns Hopkins University at Baltimore. He says all dark races prefer white skin. The broad, flat nose and the thick, wide lips are often repulsive because they suggest the African, if for no other reason. But I suspect that the thick lips are also a defect because they are in themselves a hindrance to efficient speech. And then he's also written a book which suggests strategies for racial betterment, for breeding more beautiful people and fewer undesirables. And yeah, so as disturbing as this is, refreshingly, Toni Morrison says on physical beauty, the concept of physical beauty as a virtue is one of the dumbest, most pernicious, and destructive ideas of the Western world. Uh, Maybe I wouldn't agree with her when it comes to Western world, because I think we are equally having this in the Eastern world too. Uh, so 1 minute. Okay, that's the next thing. So this is, I just wanted to show you this because this is how the standards of beauty were being fed into people. A person is not born knowing whether white is beautiful or black is beautiful, or a straight hair is beautiful or a blue eye is beautiful. It's just how it is fed into them. And this is how these great people of yesteryears have been feeding it into society, and it's stuck on. The second thing I wanted to talk to you was how black was viewed as beautiful. So initially what happened was, the initial period, it was considered black as something ugly. I'm talking about in literature. So in literature, black meant ugly. So most of the books and other things which spoke about blacks mentioned that one of the things that the blacks could do for survival was that they must assimilate. So blacks must disown their own culture and black culture, their own color and the black culture, and they must become white in outlook. Only then they can be regarded as model American citizens. There are actually books which speak about how they should assimilate and how they should get into the culture. So this black is ugly was the initial part of literature. That turned to black is beautiful. And this is a famous poem. They'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. So from there, there was a huge focus on literature, poetry, arts, everywhere, where black is shown as beautiful. And from black is ugly to black is beautiful, it shifted to black is. So I Am Alive, this is by Gloria Naylor. It's a famous short story in which there is this particular stanza. I am alive because of the blood of proud people who never scraped or begged or apologized for what they were. They lived asking only one thing of this world, to be allowed to be. And I learned through the blood of these people that black isn't beautiful and it isn't ugly. Black is. It's not kinky hair and it's not straight hair. It just is. So she says, just acceptance became the new word, just accept yourself as you are. So it's not that, okay, curly hair is beautiful, so straight hair is not, or straight hair is beautiful and curly hair is not. This is just what you are born as, and just accept it as what it is. So I just wanted to showcase how this has changed over in literature over the years, from black is ugly to black is beautiful to black is. Coming back to the previous point, 1 second. Yeah, so black is beautiful. So how does this influence behavior? One of the very interesting things I found was how this notion of physical beauty has affected the various characters in the story. So for example, if you see the narrator Claudia, she hates being gifted these American dolls for Christmas. And all these dolls are fair, they have blue eyes, and they have straight golden hair, and she hates it. So what she does is she literally breaks them apart, and just to see what is this magic about this particular thing that everyone is obsessed about it. And in fact, just like how she breaks that apart, she says that she feels like breaking apart also those girls who are just like what her those dolls were. So again, I thought that was something really powerful, for a child to feel that kind of anger and disgust at what others are obsessing over and which she can never have. Um Another interesting character was Pauline, who was completely addicted to the movies, and the movies fed into her this idea of white values and beauty, love, uh, and how physical beauty is a most important thing. So even though she gives birth to a beautiful baby with uh, smart eyes, and I think Piccola is shown as born with a nice bunch of hair, but she finds Piccola ugly. So a mother to find her child to be ugly could be the probably the worst thing that could happen to the child. And just to break out of all her obsession with this white dream, she ends up being a servant in a white family, and she proves herself to be the most ideal servant you know and yes, so we also see about mm, another thing about Claudia was that how she hates Shirley Temple, because once again Peccola loves Shirley Temple, the actress, who is beautiful, and Peccola in fact wants to be like her. But on the other side, Claudia says no, I hate it. Because I don't identify with her at all, so she obviously hates her, which is not what as a child she could explain, but that's what it is about. So yeah, how the physical beauty is again reinforced through popular cinema and consumer culture, which is another thing about another beautiful thing I think about Toni Morrison was she says in an interview that she started writing especially about black people for black people because there were no books about me. I didn't exist in all the literature I had read. This person, this female, this black did not exist, so she stepped in to fill the void. So being an African American woman in white America was something which was not there existent in either their cinema or their literature or even in their consumer culture. So the advertisements were never about a black woman buying something. So it's always a white woman buying something. And yeah, so the next point I wanted to talk to you about was about Peccola's quest. Yeah. Uh, so Peccola's quest mm, for her blue eyes is uh, is actually explained by Toni Morrison in the preface of the book, the foreword of the book. But I I think not all editions have the same foreword, so I'm not sure if you have read this or not. But I just wanted to show you, talk to you about a little bit about it. So actually, Toni Morrison started writing the story as a short story and based on an incident which happened to her in her childhood when there was her friend, another student in the class, tells her that one of the things that she desires is to have a blue eye. And Toni Morrison can't believe this. She's like, this is not going to suit her. It's not going to look good on her. And so till that particular moment, Toni Morrison says, I had seen the pretty, the lovely, the nice, the ugly. And although I had certainly used the word beautiful, I had never experienced its shock. So that was when she realizes beauty was not something to behold, it was something one could do. And when her friend says that I wish I had blue eyes, Toni Morrison, as a child, could understand how much of self-loathing uh, the child next to her must be having to ask for something like this. Though, so this is how this whole story was born. Um, Another important thing about the bluest eye was that till then, like as I mentioned, till the 1970s, all the black literature saw the African society as a monolithic society, just one African society, just the blacks. There were no divisions seen in literature, at least between the society. However, Toni Morrison clearly brings out and shows the divisions within the African American society and the kind of interactions between them. So I just had a few slides relating to that. Let me show you that. Okay. So divisions of the in the African American society. So you have this character called Maureen Peel, and she's called as the high yellow dream child, you know, and you can see a nice vast gap between rich Maureen and poor Pecola. So Maureen is rich. She is yellow. She's not dark. Though she's also a black, she is not seen as a black. And in fact, in towards the end of that particular scene, she turns and insists to Claudia and Pecola and others that I look cute. She knows that she knows and she feels that she has one up over them. So this was a very interesting division between them. The second interesting character I really found this scene immensely interesting was Geraldine, where she makes a distinguishes between colored and niggers. So according to her, she is colored. Geraldine is colored, but when it comes to Pecola, she is a nigger. So these browns take pride in being colored and distance themselves from the niggers. That is why Geraldine does not allow her son Junior to play with the latter. She explains to him the difference between colored people and niggers. They are easily identifiable. Colored people were neat and quiet, niggers were dirty and loud. He belonged to the former group. She has to keep reinforcing that into his head. She has to keep telling him, no, no, you belong to the former group. She's acutely conscious of the fact that the line between the colored and nigger was not always clear. Subtle and telltale signs threatened to erode it, and the watch had to be constant. So in winter, she applied Jurgen's lotion on his face to keep the skin from becoming ashen. This was, I think, hats off to Toni to actually really bring it out and show to us the kind of divisions that existed in their society too. There's a little more. Then we have this Soaphead Church. And again, Soaphead Church, when they talk about his family, so there's this quote which says, whose family could be traced back to people who tried to lighten their complexion and thin out the family features by marrying up. So I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to this to the font size over here. I didn't notice that it's all okay, but anyway, it's fine. So I think I spoke about this, but just a little bit more. So Pauline, she was never able, after education in the movies, to look at a face and not assign it some category in the scale of absolute beauty. And the scale was one she absorbed in full from the silver screen. So when Pecola was born, she has smart eyes, head full of hair, etc. But Pauline finds her ugly. She transfers her self-contempt to her child. So just like how she does not like herself, seeing her mother, the child also takes the same thing. And there is a place in the story where it says the entire family's ugliness arises out of their conviction that they are ugly, not because they are ugly. I think Claudia says that. And of course, the scene in the kitchen in the White House, in the white man's house, where I think Pecola drops some. I think she drops the berry cobbler on and burns her legs. But her mother does not bother that her daughter has been burned. She is more worried about the flooring which has gotten spoiled, and she keeps insisting and telling, oh my god, you did this to my floor, which was, I think, a very powerful statement. That one word that she used, my floor. While in her own house, she doesn't care to clean up or look after or do anything. She tries to make the white man's house her own house, and she insists it's my floor that's been soiled. So she disowns her own daughter over there, and I think that scene was pretty sad. Um, okay, so before we go to the next few questions which I had, before that, I'm going to just stop sharing and have a look at your comments. Okay. Okay. Last two lines are missing. I'm sorry, I don't understand which two lines you had mentioned. Okay. Children should read reality and not fairy tales. Yeah, I think true. Because how long do you just exist in the fairy tale world? And, it's shocking, this idea of beauty. True, Tulika, because when I first read it, I was absolutely stunned. I didn't realize that there were actually books and literature which existed, which asked the Black people to assimilate into the culture, to give up their own culture and their color. So it was shocking. Uh, but we have to agree that people are basically attracted to fair skin and blue eyes. The cosmetic industry plays on it. Definitely. And I think, some two, three places in the novel too, there are some products mentioned which are used by Black people. And one of some perfumes, and I think there were some creams and lotions and stuff which are mentioned. And all that entire industry, of course, plays to that this is what is attractive. Okay. I must say that the book has dazzling prose, true. The protagonist Pecola's struggle and journey from being ugly to become beautiful are painful. Both the important features of the society then, first, whiteness as a standard of beauty, and two, racism, continue to be true today. Very true. In fact, that's what I was thinking, we think that this has happened in the past and this is past, but imagine it's still happening. And I don't know when it's ever going to be over. We just had the movement happening there, the riots happening in America just now. So I guess this racism and sexism also continue. One of the most heartbreaking parts were when Pauline is comforting the white girl from the family she works for while berating Pecola. I agree with you completely. It was it really broke me down at that particular point. Just to put myself in Pecola's shoes was definitely very, very disturbing. This is because economically her position is far better than Pecola. True. Very, very true. In fact, if you see Geraldine or even Maureen for that matter, both of them are in an economically a better position than Pecola, which is what I think has been again a very important reason for the whole thing. Oh yes, that bit about the my flow was powerful. Yes, yes, Tulika. We picked the same sequence. I'm glad. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen once again and go back to the presentation. We have a little bit more left, and this time I just have some questions. So I would love it if you can just pitch in and talk about it. So I'm going to just show you the question, come back, and after we see the question, I'm just going to continue and come back and wait for your comments over here. I think I have some 3 questions, and then we can wind up. So let me share the screen. Okay. Yeah. So how do Blacks view themselves in the novel? Is there a similarity in their points of view? Um, I would love to know what you think about it. I'll also share my point of view on this particular questions. But I would like to know what you think. How do Blacks view themselves in the novel? Like for us to read about them is different, But what do you think that they see themselves as? How do you think they see themselves as? And do you think there is a similarity in their points of view? So I'm going to stop sharing, listen to your comments, share my views, and then we can come back. Yes. So how do blacks view themselves in the novel? Mm, one of the things I felt, I'm not sure if I'm right. If any of you have a different point of view, then you can please share it with me. I felt that every person in the novel viewed themselves very differently. Like Pecola and also Pauline were really hated themselves. They did not like how they looked. They were beating themselves up about it. However, on the other side, I really liked how Claudine stood up for what she was. So this is how I am. Claudia stood up for what she was. So she was like, "This is how I am," and I somehow Claudia's character seemed to fill me with a lot of hope. And one thing I wondered was, is it because Claudia had, though a little strict mother, but a mother who really cared about her and who looked after her, while Pauline maybe didn't have that. So Claudia had a loving childhood and caring parents, but Pecola did not have that. Could that be a reason why, this entire thing happened? Just like uh, maybe children are, of course, the mirrors of how their parents are. And I think that's also something the author has brought out over here. So for me, I felt not all the authors, not all the characters think, you know, think in the same way. I agree. I loved Claudia. She had so much fire. Yes, she did have. It was disturbing and scary to see her, talk about tearing down the dolls and wanting to do that same to the children who were looked like that. But I think to a large extent, she knew that this is not me and she wanted to stand up for herself. And that also reminds me that I read somewhere that certain parts of this entire book could have been autobiographical for Toni Morrison. I don't know how much true it is. It's just something that I read. For instance, there's a lot, the story takes place in Lorain, Ohio. And Toni Morrison was born in Lorain, Ohio, which is near Cleveland. And also, one more thing which I read was, yeah, it's not, I've not written it down here, but one more thing which I read was there is this scene, of this tenant who stays in their house. I forgot his name, Henry Washington. Yeah. So Henry Washington, the rumor, he tries to misbehave with Freda, and for that, the father throws him out of the house and throws the cycle on him, his bicycle on him. And I don't know for what reason, but this same incident happened in Toni Morrison's house. And her father is famous for having thrown a cycle on someone. Maybe not exactly for molestation, I don't know for what reason, but he did it. So this was also inspired by her own family. So I guess there are certain parts of which are autobiographical, and maybe it's difficult for an author to keep their life separate from the book that they write. Yeah, especially in a first book, I guess. Okay, so I'll go back and go to the next question, and would love to know if you have any other views with it. Please keep the comments coming. So, yes. So the next one is Pecola's quest for blue eyes hers alone, or is it something wider? Uh, I'm going to stop sharing. Is Pecola's quest for blue eyes hers alone, or is it something wider? Would love to know what you think about that. Okay. There's one more comment. Yeah. They are putting themselves down. They feel they are inferior. They give importance to the whites whom they work for. It is really pathetic that people think that blue eyes will make her beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. White is only skin deep. Beautiful should come from the heart. I think this same the same thought I had read somewhere on. I think it was a quote by Toni Morrison where she says, yeah, I think I shared the quote also. It's dumb to base the entire uh, value system of a person and who the person is based on their physical beauty or color. And it's also there in the foreword of the book where she mentions beauty was not simply something to behold. Only when she sees that how powerful the others are, that she says beauty is not something to behold, it was something one could do. And that's true, I guess, to a large extent. In especially in even now to date, in certain careers, maybe like a receptionist in a hotel, or if you go as if you see the receptionist in most hotels or even in some companies, they are always slim, fair, with straight hair, and maybe in our society not with maybe blue eyes, but if I'm very sure if it's going to be abroad, it's going to be golden hair and blue eyes. Yeah. So it's definitely wider, though it may not have been as specific as Pecola's wish. Yeah, true. Pecola's quest for blue eyes, I think, is definitely wider, though it may not have been as specific as Pecola's wish, because Claudia's sister was also enamored of that Shirley Temple doll. True. And very true. And so not just Pecola, it was also Pauline who was, obsessed with it, obsessed with beauty. And also when Maureen enters the class as this new student, all the teachers and elders, everyone is completely, in love with her. So she gets all the preference of being the pet student in the class. So I guess yes, to a large extent, true. And yes, I'll go to one last question which I have. Yes. Sorry for this up and down thing because I didn't know that I will not be able to see the comments if I start the share screen. Okay. So how do blacks view themselves? Is there a similarity in their point of view? Okay. I guess I finished it then. Right. Okay, so I'm done with all the questions which I prepared. And if there is anything that anyone would like to share, or even if you would like to come online, just drop a message. I'll send you the link immediately. Drop in the comments that you would like to join us, and I can add you here. Okay, and there's one more comment. It is definitely something wider. She feels blue eyes are the ultimates. Others may have opted for something else like, yeah, curly hair. Okay, true. Very true. I think just like for Pecola, the thing has been blue eyes. So blue eyes is just symbolic over here. For someone else, it might be straight hair. For someone else, it might be, a fairer skin. So just like how people are, I think, which is why Fair and Lovely sells so well here. Okay. Big thanks for this, Archana. It helped me push this wonderful book up on my TBR. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad all of you joined in. And it's the same for me, Tulika. The book has been there with me for ages, and I never read it. And I would not have maybe read it as deep as I read now if it wasn't for all of you, being with me. And I hope we can read many more books like this, much more in depth. And I think tomorrow I'll put up a post which with a poll for the read for September, and do help me by voting for it, and let's choose the next book, and I'm sure we'll enjoy that. Okay. In one of her interviews, Toni Morrison said, if you can only be tall because someone is on his knees, that is a serious problem. Yes, I read this quote too. One suggestion to everybody here would be to please check out her interviews. They are really something out of the world. I have rarely been so enamored by someone's interviews that I've been watching them, and most of them are there on YouTube. There's another very interesting interview which I wanted to share with you. There was one in which there is this uh, journalist who asks her, when are you going to write a book for whites? When are you going to write a book where whites are going to be the most important people in the novel rather than the blacks? Because all her books are, as she says, it's for a black audience. And Toni is offended, and she gives it back to her in such a beautiful way, where she doesn't shout, she doesn't scream, but just in the way she spells out the words, and she says, do you even realize how racist it was? That question was, would you ever go and ask any other white or male writer, when are you going to write for blacks? Why are you writing only for a white audience? Why don't you write for a black audience? When you don't do that, why are you asking me such a question? So yes, it was Toni Morrison's interviews are great. Thank you so much for sharing that quote. Thanks for everything, Archana. Looking forward to more such discussions. Thank you, Manisha. Thank you so much for joining in. This was my experience. Had a lovely and lively discussion. Hope to attend more. Yes, I hope you would continue attending many more. I think this video is going to remain on Facebook, so you can come back and refer to it. And the entire presentation will I'm planning to just upload it to the Facebook group, and I think there's a files section, so I'll put it over there. Anyone can, you can feel free to pick it up and read it and go through it. I hope you find it useful. Thank you so much for being here, and it's been nearly an hour. Thank you so much for having the patience and sticking around for so long. Yeah, I don't know about others. Reading this book has been a participatory and profound emotional experience. The book left me with sadness. Thank you. Yes, it is the same for me, and I'm very sure it was the same for everyone. Yes, it did, and but I think that's what literature is supposed to do. As I have this one more beautiful quote by Toni Morrison, where she says, the best art is political. It must affect change, improvement, take cataracts off people's eyes in an accessible way. It may be soothing, it may be painful, but that's the author's job, to enlighten and to strengthen. So I guess, yes, that's her, that's what she wanted to do to us, and she's done it. Thank you so much, everybody. And it's been a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining in. Bye-bye. Good night.